Hello and welcome to another edition of PerrisScope. I'm your host, Jeff Allen. The City of Perris, California is giving businesses in any industry poised for growth yet another reason to consider the city to start or expand their business. Currently, Perris is a great location for EB-5 regional centers and developers participating in the EB-5 program. Much, if not all of the city is in a TEA zone. To fill us in on all the details and why this is important to EB-5 regional centers, operators, developers, business owners, and foreign investors, I'm joined by Mr. Richard Dozier, Principal Foreign Trade Specialist at the Riverside County Economic Development Agency. Mr. Dozier, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Let's talk a little bit about you first of all, just a little bit about what you do for the county and a little bit about the Foreign Trade Office, because it is a very busy office indeed, as we've learned in the past.
Well, about 5 years ago, just about at the beginning of the downturn of the economy, the Board of Supervisors were astute enough to look around and say, what sectors can we look at that are growth sectors or sectors that we can pay attention to and help it grow. And one of the sectors that was brought to their attention was the fact that foreign trade had been expanding for several quarters prior to the downturn of the economy, and it was a sector that was, at least to that point, we didn't pay much attention to. And so by applying some attention to it, we at least saw a good opportunity to grow it. And the Board of Supervisors immediately decided to create an Office of Foreign Trade, which was the first Office of Foreign Trade at a county level in the United States. And people were skeptical. They said, well, wait a minute, this is the realm of state, even federal, with the Department of Commerce and different agencies that did this kind of activity. Our supervisors' thought was, well, we're not trying to replace anything that those agencies do, and they do a good job of that. We just want to, in some way, engage our county and control our own destiny and involve ourselves in any way we can involve ourselves to advance the idea of foreign trade. And there were two basic missions. One, our manufacturers needed to export. They don't export enough. In fact, nationally, most American companies do not export. The statistics bear out that we've been doing business with ourselves for over 200 years. And now some of our companies have so much competition from within that they have to look outside of our borders for growth possibilities and potential. So our mission is to help them do that, help them find those foreign markets, help them learn and understand how to conduct foreign trade, and take the mystery out of it so that they can engage globally in whatever market they wish to engage. The second part of the mission is to make friends internationally and learn enough about their economic efforts and see if we can convince them that Riverside County is a good place to invest foreign dollars. So those are the basic two missions of our office.
Well, as a result of all the efforts too, the county is kind of held in high regard by state and federal officials as far as the foreign trade efforts are concerned, because it has been so proactive and is kind of looked at as the standard bearer for other counties in the country to follow. And there seems to be some activity around the country that is happening as a result of the efforts that Riverside County has made. Our subject today really kind of deals with EB-5, the City of Perris in particular, and there are a couple of components to our discussion that I want to talk about. We talked about EB-5 a little bit, you touched on it, and of course TEA, and we're going to get to that in a second. But the EB-5 program, I've found that there are a number of business owners and developers who, while they may be familiar with EB-5, maybe the name, they're not exactly sure what that program is. Can you kind of clarify and fill us in on what the EB-5 program is all about?
Well, the program was started by the federal government in 1990, and it was a little-known program, but it was designed as an economic development tool that the federal government would use to encourage foreign direct investment. into the United States. And what they would do to encourage it is they would allow a visa program through the immigration office where anyone investing at a certain level in the United States could secure a visa to come here and do that work. They and their immediate family could get visas to come to the United States. That project had to create 10 American jobs, not necessarily for the investor, but American jobs, people that were already here in the United States. And so those were a couple of the criteria that were used. There was a minimum investment of $1 million. Later they put another part of the program together to allow a $500,000 investment to do the same thing if they were investing in the TEA that you mentioned, the targeted employment areas of our country. So it was little used in the very beginning. But when our economy started to tighten and the traditional funding banks and finance companies started to tighten up here in the United States, developers or people who had projects that needed funding to complete started looking around and saying, well, where else could we go to find funding to fund some of these projects? Some of them were astute enough to look at this program, and they found that the foreign investors knew about the program, and when they offered financing, they said, could we do it through that program? Because they could get visas for them and their family to come here to the United States. Some of those developers saw it as an additional source of funding for their projects that they had not tapped before. And their position was that any funding, and they go to many sources of funding to do some of the larger projects, any source of funding like that should be added to their funding portfolio to be able to complete these projects. And so they did that. And some of the projects were huge. And because it's limited to 10 jobs per $1 million, if the project was really large and wouldn't create all of the jobs that it would need to create to finance the whole thing, then they saw immediately that that part of it could be done by EB-5, and then the other part would be traditional funding that they would get from their normal sources. So those kinds of projects would meld the traditional sources with the new EB-5 funding that was available. And they found that not only was it somewhat easier to get, but it was also less expensive than some of the traditional sources that they were using.
So we see a benefit. We see a benefit obviously to the investors because they're talking about a visa which allows them to enter the country and live here. And then we're talking about a benefit to developers and business owners who are looking for investors to help offset much of, if not in some cases perhaps most of the expense of setting up their business and developing their companies. Let's now look at TEA, those letters, TEA. What do they stand for, and why is the City of Perris kind of involved in TEA? Why is that important with regard to the city?
Well, in May of 2014, prior to that, we had a very high unemployment rate in our county. And our entire county qualified as a targeted employment area because of that high unemployment. And so anyone who wanted to do an EB-5 project could pick anywhere in our county and do them. And if you are targeting an employment area that's challenged, then you only have to invest $500,000.
And that's key because that's half of what the previous minimum was in those areas that are not designated as TEA.
That's correct. And we used to say that Riverside County, prior to May 2014, was the blue light special, so to speak, of, for the EB-5 investor. And we marketed our county that way to get people to look at us because our entire county was a targeted employment area. After May 1st, 2014, our employment numbers started to improve. They didn't improve in every area. There were some cities that they went below the threshold to qualify for the $500,000 investment. Other cities, like Perris, still have the advantage of being considered a T area or a targeted employment area. That's an advantage for the City of Perris, and one that Perris can advertise and actually attract EB-5 investors for that purpose. In fact, it's probably a little known fact that one of the most aggressive EB-5 investors in Riverside County started in the City of Perris by buying 30 condos in Perris about 3 years ago. It wasn't an EB-5 funded project. It was a private investor or investor company buying those condos and managing them and renting those condos out, which they still own and rent today. But that was their first foray, so to speak, into the investment in Riverside County. Then they looked at the potential of bringing EB-5 investors to invest in Riverside County where they had invested. And since that time, they have about 4 or 5 projects in Riverside County. Unfortunately, not in the City of Perris. These 4 or 5 are in various other cities, but in Riverside County. They've invested probably over $100 million already in the last 3 years just on projects that they've gotten started. Some of them are almost to fruition.
So it's very, very significant. But I think the thing that's important to mention here is the fact that because Perris is in a TEA and is essential or is designated as a TEA, and I'm assuming most of the city is in that TEA or T zone, that it makes it especially attractive to obviously foreign investors who no longer have that $1 million minimum commitment that they need to make, and many of them are able to do that, but now it includes a number of other investors who may not have been able to put up that much money in terms of investment dollars. And that's also good, it seems to me too, Richard Dozier, that it's good for developers because it's attracting more people to the area, more investors to the area. And so that opens up, it seems, more opportunities for these developers and businesses to attract those investors' attention. Let's talk about how it's also good for the economy as a whole in the city. I mean, we're talking about economic development in the purest form by essentially creating potential jobs. Right?
Yes. We keep track of the projects. They have to now provide a targeted employment letter to the state, and it has to come through the county. So prior to that, prior to us being an entire T area, we didn't need to get those letters. Mm-hmm. But now, if you're in Riverside County and you're trying to put a project in that's not in a T area, if you want to qualify for the $500,000 investment, you then have to look at the census tracts and figure out where your employees are going to come from for that project. If you're near a T designated area, you can, even though the project itself may not be in a T designated area, if it will affect the surrounding areas that are T areas, you can conjoin those and come up with a number that qualifies for that $500,000 investment. So a lot of people are using that strategy because the reduction obviously was designed to help encourage them to invest in areas where we needed it the most. And as long as they can still show that it will affect those areas, they can do projects that are outside the T area, but will affect where the people who are going to get those jobs will come from. We have, for example, just in the last year and a half, because we've been having to collect those T letters, we're aware of 39 projects that are EB-5 funded projects and applied through the EB-5 visa program in Riverside County. Those are the ones we know of. Those are the ones that they were going after the $500,000 investment, so they had to be in a T area or qualified to be in under the T designation. Just those projects alone, just those 39 that we know of, if they all build out, we're talking about $700 million in investment from just those 39 projects. And when I say those are the ones we know of, it's because if someone comes in and they're not interested in the T area, but they're interested in just a normal area or a city that's not in a T, they have no reason to announce that to us. They can be a regional center just working on a project and just go ahead and apply to have the project permitted through the city that they want. We might hear about it, and then we try to catalog it. But they have no reason to ask us for a letter, so we're not immediately announced to the project. There are a lot of projects like that pop up in our county. We don't track those because we don't know of them unless they're brought to our attention. But of the ones we do know of, those 39, we're talking $700 million investment. That's significant, and it's over 10,000 jobs that it represents to our county. So you just look at that piece and you say, well, how important is this investment to our county? Well, that demonstrates how important it is to our county.
And those obviously sound like big numbers. I mean, you're talking about 700 million, 10,000 jobs, but I mean, that does not begin to really tell the story of the potential in economic benefit and impact to the county. I mean, in terms of real dollars, it's exponential, and it's really off the charts. With regard to the city of Perris and other cities like Perris that are located or designated as T, in those T designations, T areas that we talked about, you're talking about a ready, willing, and able workforce that is built in. You got people that are ready to go to work. And so once you get those businesses established and they open their doors, and those business owners, I'm assuming that the conditions are the same, they have to have the commitment of adding 10 jobs.
That's
is that
correct.
Okay, and is that over a 2-year period or 2-year period?
Exactly right.
Okay, so you're talking about, again, it just seems like the attraction of those T designated areas is such a great thing for investors and developers alike. What are some of the other areas, attributes of the city of Perris that make it, you believe, Richard Dozier, so attractive to business owners and developers as far as those areas to set up business?
Well, the city of Perris is very, very fortunate. It's one of those cities that has available land at a competitive price. And they're in the pathway of growth. I mean, the Western Riverside County continues to grow like our entire county does. And so Perris is no exception. The land that they have at very reasonable prices is a significant advantage for them. And they're not all built out. There's room for growth, and people are coming to the Perris community. They find housing, affordable housing there. That's been that way for the last 10 or 12 years. So these are significant drivers. If you have someone who's looking, an investor who's looking for a T area, for one, to get the savings, and they're investing in that area, it's going to mean that some of them are going to need housing in that area. They think it's a blessing because they look at the housing prices closer to the ocean, closer to LA, and some of them can afford those houses. But they have friends and other countrymen that have come here and have bought some of those houses, and when they compare what they see and what they can get out here in Riverside County and particularly in Perris, they see that they can get a lot more house and a lot more land for very reasonable prices. And then they look around and they say, can I educate my children? And they see UCR, they see 4 different colleges that they can educate their children. What's been amazing to watch the progression of the thinking of these investors. If they don't see adequate schooling for the younger age kids, they're now talking about investing in schools. They're talking about investing in land and making sure that they have the kinds of schools that they can guarantee that their kids are going to get a first-class education, as well as putting their older children, their teenagers, into our university system and our college systems.
What you can probably argue too, as that sort of thing happens, it begins to ratchet up the level of competition among schools, and also too, it does, I think, create change, or at least an attitude of change, that the other schools in the area need to maybe rise to a certain level in order to meet those expectations. Because it's, I mean, that in itself is another debate for another program.
I know, that's another program.
You bet, it sure is. But a couple of other key points I'd like to make here really before we close today, Richard, is talk to us a little bit about, you know, you're on the front lines, and obviously this is something that you eat, drink, and sleep, and it's just part of your day. But what is the County of Riverside right now doing, and what are you engaged in to help continue to attract more investment into the area from outside sources, perhaps overseas, with respect to the EB-5 program?
Well, we try to advertise the fact that we have some advantages for an EB-5 investor. At the end of the day, when you have to compete with, these people can invest anywhere in the world, and this is what we let them know. We appreciate when they come to us because they can go anywhere. They have the money if they want to invest. They come to the United States because we're still one of the best places that can not guarantee, but they have a good chance of making their investments pay off, and they feel it's safe. So that's an advantage we have. And they can look anywhere else in any other country that can say that same thing. Countries in Europe and different places, Germany, places around the world. They could invest there if they wanted to. How do we get them to look at Riverside County? Certainly we use the fact that, hey, you only have to invest $500,000 in many of the cities that we have here. But also we have space, we have room, we're one of the largest counties in the country, and we're growing. And if you're looking at an investment, and if you're investing in front of that growth, that's a good investment. And many of those new investors from around the world, they want to own something. They want to own land, they want to own a building, a hotel. They want equity investments. It's what they want. And so when they look at relative pricing, relative to other communities that are west of us, they see that we really are an excellent opportunity and that we will probably be growing. Here's a good example. The Chinese EB-5 Regional Center looked at, I think it was about 1/8 of an acre in University Village in the city of Riverside. They bought that for about $1.8 million, and they want to put a 5-story extended stay hotel on it. They like it because it's within walking distance to UCR. They did their homework. They know that the Pacific Rim population at our UC systems continues to grow, as well as at UCR. And they see an opportunity to provide a upscale hotel for visitors from the Pacific Rim, all visitors, but specifically they were looking at the growth of the Pacific Rim population here in our county. And so they're investing EB-5 dollars and encouraging their investors to invest in properties like that. I think they're smart to do that. I think they've picked a good project. That University Center is already doing well. They want to put restaurants in the hotel, and that would be helpful to them. So those are really good projects. How we try to help them is one, if we know of something that they're particularly looking for, we try to let them know what's available. They can then decide whether they want to develop it or not, or take advantage of it. After we do that, though, we don't just let them go their way. We say, you're going to enter into a permitting process for your projects. So we try to help them through those permitting projects, particularly if they're with the county. So we provide kind of a concierge service for them. We just don't let them go off on their own. If they need any help, then they just call us and say, hey, this is stuck in fire, or it's stuck in building and safety. Mm-hmm. Do you know anybody that we can talk to see if we can work this out? And we're there to help them to see. We want them to be successful. We want them to have successful projects because it helps us, it provides jobs, it provides foreign direct investment. So that level of interaction with them, and they appreciate it. We have one regional center who comes and they bring all of their investors to meet just people in our economic development office, because to them it's kind of like a lifeline. If they get involved in a project, and we tell them, we say, look, people will sell you something. They might sell you anything. But why don't you do more due diligence and find out that what you really want to do, you can do in this piece of property, that you can do in this city, that you can do in this county. Do that first before you spend your money, because they're international clients and they're not always familiar with how we operate.
Well, Richard, this has been a really fascinating discussion. It certainly seems that the EB-5 program attracting a lot of positive attention, and with the help of the County of Riverside, a lot of eyes being cast now toward Perris as really a land and an area of opportunity for developers, investors, and now hopefully many folks in Perris looking for work, a large workforce indeed that is ready, willing, and available there. And it just seems there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. I want to thank you so much for stopping by the studio today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's Richard Dozier. He is a foreign trade specialist with the County of Riverside's Economic Development Agency. For more information, including the potential benefits to your company of participating in the EB-5 program within the TEA zone in the City of Perris, you're encouraged to contact the Economic Development Department at City Hall by calling 951-943-6100 extension 277. Again, that number 951-943-6100 extension 277. Or you can visit the city's website at cityofperris.org. For PerrisScope, I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for watching.